I think, like, what I see on social media, and I love your social media, is that you do film your whole life. Like, a lot of times, like going out to eat, doing things, you film a lot of content. Is that exhausting?
Yes, it is exhausting. I mean, the thing about my celiac is it was never really a big part of my life until I started recording content. And the reason I started recording content was because I wanted to create a business to help people with food allergies find safe restaurants. So that is like the whole reason I started my account. It wasn't just because I liked recording myself. I actually hate recording myself. And I don't really enjoy social media. Like, I feel like it's a very toxic platform. But I knew that if I learned the skill of social media and marketing, that like I would be able to help people in a greater capacity. And so that's the reason I do it. But
Welcome to Behind the Allergy, a podcast all about allergic conditions, hearing open and honest insights from the people who are behind them, from allergy reactors to free-from brands to allergists. This episode is with Kayla King, a content creator, app developer, and restaurant curator for the Fig app. Kayla King has had celiac disease for 17 years, and she shares content about eating out confidently with celiac disease. I hope that you enjoyed the episode
celiac
and go
and
away learning more
allergies
about
are
her
like a
story
little bit
behind
different
the
in that
allergy.
facet.
You have given me the confidence to film my, like, going out to eat or going on airplanes and things like that because, you know, I can see you setting up the phone when they come over to talk to you at a restaurant, or, you know, filming when you're doing a phone call, like ordering food and things like that. And it's never been something that has been a part of my content because that for me is a moment of fight or flight. Like, that for me is like, I have to pay so much attention because that could be life and death for me. So it's always, sometimes I forget to hit record. I think, oh yeah, I'm going to do it. And then they come over and I'm like, yeah. And then they leave and I'm like, I forgot to hit record. And it's like, there's so many things. And my boyfriend always just goes, it's okay, like, this moment is so important that it's okay if you didn't film it. And I'm like, okay, fine. But you've given me that confidence, but it can be really hard to think about content when it's your life on the line kind of thing, and like your health on the line. It's, you know, it's difficult to do that. And then when things go wrong, and you have filmed like when things go wrong, or when somebody has, you know, said something, or you don't feel safe, or you're eating something and you suddenly get anxiety when you're eating it. But the biggest thing in what you just said is that it does help people.
Yeah, and it's very circumstantial as well. Like, there are certain things I definitely don't record because I'm like so anxious in that moment, to your point, that it just like doesn't happen. But usually, like, I think about it in advance, right? So like before I even enter the restaurant, I like hit record, and so there's like 20 minutes of no like fluff that I just edit out, right? So I like think about it way in advance because I know, similar to you, that like once I get in that moment, I'm going to be focused on that moment and I'm going to be stressed out and I'm not going to be thinking about the camera, which is why like you can see in my videos, none of them are good quality. They're always like in my lap, or like they're not set up well, and that's because like I'm not really focused on the recording. Again, like I pressed that record button 15 minutes ago and it's just like existing in there and I'm doing my thing because, yes, to your point, like you need to focus on that conversation with the staff. And yes, like I've done it a million times, so it does come like a bit more natural to me. But to your point, I'm not like pressing record 2 seconds, you know, before the waiter comes, because that would make me frazzled and freak out. And that's a very important conversation. And when I get sick, like the only time that I've really recorded when I get sick is like that time prior to when I get really sick, because I have like celiac is very different from food allergies, where like I have a 2 to 5 hour window where like I'm starting to feel worse and worse and worse, right? So if I'm recording, it's usually like when I just get sick and like showing the initial anxiety. But if I'm getting to a point where like I'm throwing up and having like sweats and chills and all that kind of stuff, like you will not see my camera out. So
Yeah, you know what? That's really fascinating, and that helps me a lot because I do it in like when they come over, and just doesn't happen often. Like you said, it's a highlight reel. It's not that I don't show everything of my life kind of thing.
Yeah, social media can feel like high pressure, right? So there are moments where like something happened and I'm like, wow, like my community would have really enjoyed to see this and like I didn't record it. And sometimes I will like talk about it after if I didn't record it. And I guess it's not the same, it doesn't perform as well. So I understand that pressure of like
Oh, for
feeling
sure.
that you need to record everything. And like I just think like we're all trying our best, right? And like this is free content that we're putting out there. And like I definitely don't record every part of my life. Like I record a lot of the same things, if that makes sense. Like I have a process, right? Like I record my eating out. I record like if I'm packing for a trip. I record if I'm like making some kind of special meal that day. But like 75% of my life, I don't record.
You were diagnosed with celiac disease very young.
Yeah.
Most people, sorry, I need a tissue. This is actually just my life. Yeah, you were diagnosed with celiac disease quite young, at 8 years old. And most of the people that I follow that have celiac disease, they did get diagnosed quite later in life, like
Yeah.
teenage years, in their 20s. A lot of people are getting diagnosed in their like 40s, 50s now. So I wonder, how has it been? Like, obviously you don't know the difference, but how has it been, the confidence that you have gotten, because you've been dealing with it basically your whole life? How, do you think that you have more confidence when managing celiac than some people who have only been dealing it with 5, 6 years?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, part of it is being diagnosed as a kid. The other part is just my personality and the way my parents raised me, right? So there are tons of kids that have been diagnosed young that still don't have the confidence because like of situational things. They just never learned it. They never put themselves out there, right? Like if you ask my mom when I was like 10 years old, like only a year or two after getting diagnosed, like how I reacted to going out to eat, I was like, my mom would try to talk to a waiter and I would be like, Mom, don't do that. I need to do it. And I would be like, why are you talking for me? I have a voice. And like I wanted to like be a part of it and I wanted to like manage my own condition at a really young age. So part of it is just like my personality and again like my dad's a musician, so he's very extroverted and like I was a dancer. I was in a professional play when I was really young. So I was like thrown into an adult world around the same time that I got diagnosed with celiac disease. Like I was in a professional setting. I was in the Broadway show Billy Elliot. I was around a bunch of adults. So like during that time was around the same when I got diagnosed with celiac disease. So I just like was thrown into maturity pretty quickly and I was like going downtown every day and because I was going downtown I had to find food and I had to eat out. Like I also wasn't really a normal kid. So because of that I like had to have confidence, right? I had to have confidence because I was performing in front of thousands of people. I had to have confidence because I was by myself in downtown Chicago trying to figure out food half the time. So that's part of the reason why I had confidence at such a young age. And so that's why I say like when like before I started my journey on social media, I was like in my own little bubble. And I was like, oh, celiac disease, like that's just something you deal with. Like because at a young age, I like had to have that confidence and I had to figure it out. And my parents taught me to never back down and to ask for what I needed and ask for accommodations and be kind and respectful about it, right? So because I was doing that when I was 10 years old, as I grew up, I just like thought that was normal. And then I realized that that's not normal. And a lot of people do have anxiety around it. And that is a really difficult thing for a lot of people. And like, by no means am I perfect. Like, I still get sick. And I would say now because my job is surrounded around eating out, I probably get sick at a higher frequency than I used to because I just like generally didn't go out to eat as much. So it still happens. Like, the industry is not perfect by any means. There's been a lot of reactions recently, not just by me, but by like a lot of other allergy creators. But that is part of the reason why I built so much confidence, is just like, yes, being diagnosed as a kid and doing it my whole life, but then also just like the circumstances of me growing up and who my parents are as people.
Yeah. And I think as well, what I'm finding, because I'm seeing a lot more of reactions as well on the allergy side of it lately, and obviously on the celiac side. And I think that we are becoming a little bit more trusting. Because like when I was younger, I'd go there, like you said, and I'd go to a restaurant, and if they couldn't cater for me, cool, that's fine. And I'd walk out and they would say that they couldn't cater. Whereas now I find that people who can't cater will say they can, and then something happens, and so you believe it's okay because now the world is more understanding and aware. But so we go, okay, that's fine, and then it's not fine, and we've lost that second guessing a little bit, like that. Are you sure? Can you tell me why? And what I like about your videos and what I like about your content is that you go, oh, last time you put this out for me, can you do that again? Or last time you did it from something in the back, is that still an option? Like, you ask questions about their processing, which I find, for me, the reason I lack in confidence is that sometimes I'm scared to know how they do it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to deal with like how the cookie gets made kind of thing. I want to just be like, can you handle allergies? Yeah, cool. Okay, fine. And it just like, it's so bad, but it's because like I kind of just want to eat there sometimes. And I think that you are very clear on like the procedure of what it means to do it. And I think, yeah, it's harder with multiple food allergies, but I think like you're so clear on procedure. And I really like that, because I'm like, oh, I really should ask more questions, but I'm scared to ask more questions because people have kicked me out of restaurants before because of my allergies when I was little. So I'm like, I'm scared to ask more because then they won't cater for me, but then they shouldn't cater for me if they can't answer the questions. So it's like all of this, you know?
And the reason, like, I totally resonate with the, I'm tired and I don't want to ask questions. I think because I've worked in restaurants and I've like seen the kitchen and I've talked with hundreds of chefs, I just like, I know what's going on back there, and I know if you don't like nail them with something 100 times, that like it won't land. So that like I used to, I guess, like be a little bit more ignorant and trusting with it as well, because I didn't know as much as I know now about like what happens in the back. But like, it's almost like now that I know what happens in the back, it does give me a bit more anxiety and get like have me be more on edge, because I never used to be like this. Like, I never used to like nail into questions or like do all of that. Again, because I didn't go out to eat as much and like I just wasn't as careful. I think now that I've again worked with so many chefs and seen the back of kitchens and like talked to so many people about their process and like seen whether they actually do what they say they're gonna do, that's why like I have a lot of skepticism and why I ask a lot of questions, because I've seen in multiple circumstances where like you say something and then they don't do it, or you say something and then it means something different to them than it does to you. So that's why I'm like very clear. And honestly, that was the way that my parents taught me to do it when I was younger, right? It was like we would go to a restaurant and I would be like, hey, can you take the chicken and cook it in a pan? Like, we wouldn't just give like, hey, this is what we want. We would like give them instructions on exactly how to cook it as well, in a way that would be safe for me. And so I like take that practice and I'm like, okay, just because people are a little bit more knowledgeable about allergies doesn't mean that like I shouldn't do that anymore, right? Like, I should still do the same thing that I was taught by my parents when I was younger, which is like going through the motions of like, okay, not just like what is in my food, but how are you cooking it? And in certain circumstances, like at restaurants that are really great that I've been to like a million times, I won't do that. But even like I was at a restaurant called Acreage in Lafayette, Colorado. Like, I know they're good with allergies. They have a gluten-free fryer. Like, they have all the allergen markings on their menus. Like I've already talked to their chef in the past. Like I know that restaurant really well, but like I've never eaten like a meal there. I've only had like dessert there. So even though I know that about that restaurant, when I came in, I was like, hey, do you toast your bread in a separate place? Will you grab ingredients from the back? The server was confused, so I asked for a manager. Like, even though I was trusting of that restaurant, I still went through all of my motions because I haven't eaten there. And so, like, I haven't developed a trust for that place yet, even though I know that they have good processes. So I think you still, like, somewhat have to have that barrier up just because like it's deceiving, safety, like even if they look safe on the outside, that doesn't mean that it's actually like being followed through in practice until you've had multiple good experiences with that restaurant.
I want to talk about just a little bit about relationships, because you've moved in with your partner, and how did you find like even just dating, getting into a relationship? Has it been the same confidence that you felt like going into restaurants, or was it a little bit different when you were finding a partner?
I think it's a little bit different from food allergies because with food allergies, you have to be really strict about kissing and all of that. Like I have a friend with severe tree nut, like anaphylactic tree nut allergies. So any partner that she had like could not have tree nuts in their diet. When I was dating, like I didn't have to tell my partner that they couldn't eat gluten, right? Like when we went out to eat, he could still have gluten. I just like wouldn't really kiss him, which was fine, but he didn't have to cut it out of his diet. So I think celiac and allergies are like a little bit different in that facet where it is a little bit easier with celiac in the way that like I don't need to have him adjust his diet. I just need to like be conscious of my own actions. And so when we would go out to eat, like, okay, so first of all, when me and my partner met, I was bodybuilding. So I kind of had this weird excuse where like I wasn't going out to eat anyways because I was bodybuilding, right? So celiac like wasn't even really a big deal in our relationship because bodybuilding was a much bigger deal, right? Like bodybuilding is arguably a way more restrictive diet than my celiac because with my celiac I could eat a bunch of things. With bodybuilding, like I was on like a tilapia rice broccoli diet and I couldn't eat out and I had to track everything and like it was just a very intensive thing that I was doing. And so like me being hangry, me not going out to eat, like all the things that you would normally kind of associate with an allergy or celiac, again, it was just all focused around my prep. And so that was the first like 2 years of our relationship was bodybuilding. So like I remember I met his whole family and there was like 40 people at this like family event and I brought my own little container of food because I was bodybuilding. So it like, yes, I had celiac, but like the next time that I came and like I could actually eat some of the things they were like, "Oh, great, wonderful." So I like introduced myself as like one extreme so that, and not intentionally, it was just like the way that it happened. That celiac wasn't even really
You were almost
like
you were almost restricting yourself further, so that way when you actually came back to yourself, it was a bit more freedom of what you could do. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny that
and again, not intentional, but that was just like the way that it kind of worked out.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it's funny because like we have very similar backgrounds because like I did bodybuilding, but also I was an actor in the previous life. Like it was I think that food, I found that tracking calories was a lot easier for me because I was already meal prepping my own food anyway. So what I needed to do is just count calories. Like that was nothing. And so I actually, when I came off of counting calories and came off of bodybuilding, I had a lot more freedom in my diet. And I was like, oh, I don't have to be this restrictive, but it was easy to be restrictive because I've already been restricted my whole life. Did you find that hard? Like, were you confident to do that? Even though you were bodybuilding, were you confident to just bring Tupperware to your partner's family and all of that? See, that's the confidence that you have, which I really
thought it
like.
was a lot easier with bodybuilding, I will say, because like I remember going into like True Food, for example, or like there was like a couple restaurants I went to where like I was either having to do a work meeting or like a party or something, and I was trying not to bring my own Tupperware. And me saying like, "Hey, I'm bodybuilding. Can you like take a chicken breast, put like no seasoning on it?" Like, which that's a whole other conversation. Seasoning is fine, let's be clear. But I was like giving them very specific instructions, and I was like, oh, and I also have celiac. And like I found that restaurant staff were almost like more, and not just restaurant staff, but everybody in general was like more receptive to the fact that it was for bodybuilding and not for my celiac, which I found like really intriguing because it was like if I brought a Tupperware somewhere because of bodybuilding, the responses were like, "Oh, that's cool. Tell me more. Like that's awesome." But if I bring a Tupperware somewhere with celiac, they're like, "Oh, why? Like just eat it." Like what you know? So it's interesting the responses.
This like 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
So there was a fad. I'm not gonna lie, there was a fad of bodybuilding where it was something that was cool. Everyone was doing it. I really did think because that I was doing it like 5-6 years ago, and I think that there is that thing of like it was really popular on social media, where everyone was doing it and everyone was counting calories and everyone was going to the gym lots, because I found that people were so proud that I was able to like be so like not even restrictive, but like I was putting so much time and energy into myself. And I think
Yeah,
that's
like
where it
this
came
is
from.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then when it's about allergies, it was like, oh, like
Right.
I don't want to, like, I don't know. It's just a very different world. Look, bodybuilding is I could do another podcast on my whole life. And
I mean, bodybuilding was like a big, that's how I got into social media. That was like the first social media account I created before I started talking about my celiac. So it was a really big part of my journey.
yeah. And did you talk sometimes about health as well because you're a nutritionist.
So back when I was like taken aback, I was studying abroad in Norway, and that's when I got like super into health and fitness. And that's when I started posting on social media because I was like, oh, let me start posting workout videos and eating tips and all of that. And so I have an old account, which I'll plug on this channel, but it's not very good. It's called Kayla King _fit. And that was like where I posted all my bodybuilding and health, and the content's really terrible. But that's where I started, and then after that, I there's a platform called Warrior Babe where I was like having eating like body image issues, like eating disorder problems at the time, so I was like really trying to figure out how to manage my diet, and so I found Warrior Babe, which I it's helpful. I just felt like it kind of fed my eating disorder a little bit, and that was just like me, like my own thing. But it basically taught you how to count macros, and I think just at the time with my age, all the body insecurity issues that I was having, like I was not really prepared to learn macros. I needed to like understand more of an intuitive eating approach. So it was like nothing against the program, it just like was my mindset around it. And so I started Warrior Babe and like started getting lean like really fast through macros, and so became like really reliant on it because I started to love that process of like getting lean and feeling like I had some kind of sense of control over my diet. So that's the point at which I became like very obsessed with food. And I was like, oh, I want to learn everything I can about it. So I went to go get my nutrition coaching certification, and then I actually started working for Warrior Babe. So I actually I was a coach. So I reached out to them and I was like, I love your program. I went through it, helped me lose all this weight. I like got my nutrition certification. I want to work for you. And so I came on as like an assistant coach, and then I became a normal coach in her VIP program. And so I was like coaching women 40, 50 years old, teaching them about macros, helping them lose weight, writing them nutrition plans, fitness plans. And so I was doing that for a while. But again, like during that time, I never healed this like part of me that I never got to a place where I could actually eat intuitively.
Yeah.
And I was now just reliant on macros, and that was not healthy. Like I remember there was one day that like my fitness pal went down and I had a cow. Like the world was ending. I didn't know how to eat. Like I know that sounds crazy and ridiculous, but like that was my reality. I was like, how do I put food in my mouth without my fitness pal? Like I did not know how to function. And so that was a point in time in which I was like, wow, this is like worse than I thought it was. Like this is really bad. Like I need to take a step back. And so it was really COVID where my competitions got canceled, was when I was like, okay, I can't now use bodybuilding as an excuse anymore to be tracking all of the time. So I was like, that's when I was like, okay, I need to go to therapy. I need to get a coach. I need to like start getting help, because I straight up don't know how to eat outside of my little bodybuilding circle. Right. I took a step away from coaching to like work on my own body and nutrition. And that's like when I really learned how to intuitively eat, how to have an 80-20 approach, which is why on my meal page, I really keep it focused on like being able to enjoy your life and eating out. And sometimes I get comments like I was talking about today on my story where people are like, oh, you're eating all of the time. You're eating fried chicken and desserts and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, but like to me, that's such a big accomplishment, because like 3 years ago, I wouldn't touch a dessert or a fried chicken with a 10-foot pole. Like that was not something that I felt comfortable with. And so the fact that I'm able to go out and like take a bite or like have half of a fried chicken, like that's really amazing. Like I find that really special. And so I don't really like talk about that on my social media, again, because like my social media is now about celiac and not about nutrition. But like I do have a long, like experience with nutrition and fitness, and this whole journey where I did, I was weight obsessed, and really like had a really unhealthy relationship with food, and then, transitioned into now being able to eat out and have a positive relationship with my body. So
that's amazing. I really commend you for that, because I mean, I have the similar experience. Like COVID was the thing that taught me how to know that if I didn't work out and ate whatever I wanted to, the world wouldn't end.
yes.
I was like, oh, I don't have to work out twice a day and eat certain foods in order to keep my body. And like, yes, you gain weight a little bit towards the end, but you end up just living in a normal body that you feel comfortable in. It's like, and then the mental toll is gone. And it obviously takes years, but
like it was a crutch, because I think bodybuilding is interesting, because like I felt like it was almost a crutch for my celiac sometimes. Like again, like it was easier to just say I was bodybuilding as an excuse to be restrictive.
It was easier I was always meal prepping. It was easier to say I do this because this is how many calories I have in my day. And then it felt easy. Like having bodybuilding felt like it wasn't always about my allergies. It was about that I was trying to be healthy and I was trying to do that. So it was for me, like I didn't have to focus on my allergies because I had all my Tupperware and I was doing this, but I had counted all these calories. But then I also felt like people were like, oh, she's got allergies, that's why she does it. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And so I felt like the allergies were a crutch for like I could pretend like I wasn't having a disordered eating pattern because I had allergies. So I always had to prepare my food. So it's not a problem because I always had to. So like it's not like no one could say to me otherwise because like I have to do this anyway. And so I think it helped perpetuate what I was dealing with mentally. But I think it's very interesting. I wonder if it would have taken so much of a toll on me if I didn't have food allergies, because it was a control aspect. So I was wondering whether, like, if I didn't have food allergies, but then I followed so many people who were doing the same as me and they didn't have any allergies. So I'm like, it could have just been what it would be. But then, you know, you never really know. But yeah, I think it's just an interesting facet to how we're already so restricted, yet we would restrict ourselves more. And I think you're right of that it was a little bit of a control aspect of like, this is how I can manage myself and my food with it being normalized at that time. You know, it wasn't something, and I also felt normal because so many people were doing it. So it wasn't just me by myself preparing my allergy safe food. I was doing something that everybody else was doing and I felt like I was fitting in. And so like there was this whole psychological aspect to why I was a part of that group. And then the fitting in physically as well. Like I was always a bigger kid. And so fitting in physically, fitting in like people were seeing me for the first time. I was a physical, like I looked physically fit. So people were like, ooh, and I was strong. So people were like, oh, cool. And so I just felt like I was fitting in again, whereas I was always excluded. So it's just like there's so many psychological aspects. I went through therapy as well for it. There's just a lot.
I think that's such a good point because it's like when somebody's talking to you about your food, they're not talking to you about your allergies. They're talking to you about bodybuilding, which it's like kind of nice to not have a food conversation be around your condition.
That's so interesting. It's a relief.
Yeah.
It's like,
Which is like weird. Like it's like a backwards, weird psychological thing, but like I've never talked to somebody that like also did bodybuilding
and had food restrictions.
Where I was like, oh yeah, like I feel like I fit in more, or like it's easier to have these conversations because bodybuilding felt like more of a normal thing.
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
Easier thing to talk about than like I felt like proud of my bodybuilding. Not that I don't feel proud of my celiac. It was just like my celiac wasn't something I was doing. It was something I was diagnosed with.
But allergies happened to me. I didn't choose them.
Yeah.
So
you chose bodybuilding.
Yeah, I was choosing something and I was good at it. Yes. But then I also wasn't good at it because I used it in a very different way than you used it. Like I use it to help me fit what I wanted to eat in. So like I never used it for health. I actually am healthy.
I mean, let's be clear, bodybuilding's not healthy.
No. But as in like some like I wasn't like a chicken and rice person. I was like, let's make mac and cheese fit my diet, fit my calories. I was a if it fits your macros person, not like let's just count calories. And like it was very much like I was trying to put a lot of protein powder in and a lot of this and a lot of that just so that I could eat the one thing that I wanted to eat. And I think that highlighted my own eating disorder rather than like I think a lot of people restrict their food. I wanted to eat everything on sight. And so I think it's just I think it always highlights what you're dealing with in your own world.
Well, it's interesting because like a part of my recovery actually like was eating out, weirdly enough, right? Because during the 3 years that I was bodybuilding, I like barely ate out, and it was honestly really nice because I was like, oh, I don't have to deal with my celiac because I'm not eating out, right? But when I started like seeing somebody for my eating disorder, her homework was like, okay, I want you to like try and go out to eat this week. So I almost had to like retrain myself on like how to eat out with my condition. And that's why like started eating out so much and then started posting about me eating out, because that was like straight up a part of my recovery, was like going out and realizing that certain foods were not delicacies, right? So like things like desserts, like I remember there was like this bakery in Colorado Springs and I was passing through, and it was like in the middle of my eating disorder recovery. And it was like such a big step for me to like order a baked good, take 2 bites, and throw it in the trash. Like I remember that being like a very big accomplishment, because normally like gluten-free baked goods felt like such a delicacy, and you see all these things on the internet that are like, and I do it sometimes too as a joke, where it's like, oh, you go into a gluten-free bakery, you want to buy one of everything. Well, like, even though I do it as a joke, like in the back of my mind, I'm like, low key, that's like a eating disorder pattern, because it's going to show that, that thing is being put on a pedestal. That thing is being put as a delicacy. And so that's what happened to me. It was like, because I was putting these foods on this pedestal, when I got access to them, I felt this need to like overindulge, and then I would feel sick afterwards, right? And so I had to like retrain myself that I could eat out and I could have these foods, and like my life's not restrictive with celiac disease, and like, consistently exposing myself to that actually was what really helped me recover.
It is hard. It's hard to feel like you are lacking in control, and I think that comes into what we were talking about, like it's the feeling of control. And I think I'm actually really glad that we spoke on this, because I'm understanding a little bit more about what drove you into creating content, but also it helps me. Like, I don't know whether anyone else is going to feel this way, because maybe they don't do bodybuilding or haven't had it, but like the idea of, even if it's not bodybuilding, the idea of feeling in control, and it could be anything, is it's so intense when you have food restrictions, because it's something that you have never been able, like, we don't choose, like we say, we didn't choose this life. And
like,
so
I'm not sure if this is a personality trait of like other people. Honestly, I'm sure there's some kind of correlation, but like I'm a big perfectionist and like control freak. And I do think some of that is because of just like having to manage food from a really young age. But like it spills over into other parts of my life, right? Like in my work, like again, like that's always been something that's been really hard for me. Even like in my business, like giving up control and like hiring people, that's really hard for me. Like there are so many things that we don't realize stem from the way that we interact with food through our food allergies or celiac disease. And like I studied psychology in college, so I just like I find it really interesting to look at like, oh my god, we're so similar.
We're so alike. I was like, I have a BSc in psychology, so
Interesting to see all of the parallels and like dive into it and like really reflect on like why, like where things stem from. And there's so many like unintended consequences of being diagnosed with a food restriction and wanting to feel in control. And like, I don't know, the one thing that I like always try and say on my social media is like ask for what you need. And I feel like that's such a big thing in food allergies, is like you just try and control, and you don't want to ask for help elsewhere. And so one thing that like from a young age I've always like really tried to do is like, okay, like yes, like I understand that I'm a control freak and this is probably contributing to it, but like not everything is in my control. And so like if I'm going to progress in any way, I need to like be outward, and I need to ask for, the accommodations that I need to stay safe in this world.
yeah, asking for help is not one of my strong suits.
Yeah, I don't think it is a lot of people's.
No, I'm very like, but I think the type A does come from, especially if you've had them for most of your life, like had restrictions for most of your life. It's feeling like you can't trust anyone because it's just easier if I do it myself. Because if I do it myself, I know what is being done. Whereas if you didn't do it for yourself, you don't know. You're out of control. You didn't know what was going on in the kitchen. You didn't know what was seasoned. You didn't know what was happening. So if you just do it yourself, at least you know. At least you're aware. And it's like it relinquishes that control over when you do go out to restaurants or you do have people cook for you. It's like and it's scary. And then that does play into a lot of your life because that's just who you are now. Like, you don't know any different, you know?
Yeah. And going back to your question around like dating and stuff like that, I think I found it always easier to date because I just did really like I just had control over like, I was like if we went out to eat, I was deciding, if he wanted to cook for me, I didn't let him. Like where I was like, yeah, it's okay, babe. I'm just gonna do that. And so it was like a little bit different from another relationship where like again, like I just was really type A and I was really clear about like where my boundary was. And so I think like in a relationship, again, some people are not as confident with that and they're like, they don't want to bring that up as something in the relationship. But I was just like really clear from the beginning, like, okay, these are the things that I'm going to handle myself and like I love you, but like I'm cooking my own food and I'm deciding where we go out to eat. And like I was just comfortable doing those things because I knew that's what I needed to do. So I just always find it interesting because people ask that question of like, oh, does he order for you when you eat out and stuff? And I'm like, absolutely not. I'm like, nope. I mean, like maybe if it's an 100% gluten-free restaurant, then sure, like go at it. Or if it's like a 99% gluten-free restaurant, sure. But like I have more confidence than my boyfriend when talking to wait staff, so it's like why would I put that on him? Maybe 10 years down the road when we're married he'll do it, but like I don't feel the need to like put that on him right now. Like celiac is not my life, Like I like to travel. I'm love to exercise. Like I'm a big outdoors person. Like there were so many other things in my life. I just happen to like be known for celiac because that's what I share online, right? But like people that comment on my posts and they're like, "Oh, you're making celiac your whole life." I'm like, "Actually, I'm not. That's just what you're seeing." So, there's so many other components
Yeah.
and like again, like for anybody listening, like your food allergy, your celiac disease does not define you. Like there are so many other layers to everyone. And I think it's easy to like get caught up in your food restriction, but again, like it's just it's one part of your life and you you have control, right? Like you have control over how you manage it, whether you go out to eat. And so I think like a lot of times I see people have like let their food allergy or celiac disease take over their lives, but like it's easy to forget that like you're the one in control and you can figure out how to manage it.
I've known you since like almost close to when you started, and the first time we did a live, and like that, I feel like we have been supporting each other here and there over the years, and I'm so impressed and amazed at how you have grown and how you share and the content that you provide, and it's helped me and it's helped so many other people. And so what you said, like you only do it to help others, and like you've done it. Like yeah, it's incredible.
That's part of the reason why I like share about eating out and everything like that is because like I strive to like have a resource for people to like enter into that world and feel comfortable going outside their comfort zone. So like I'm the extreme, right? Like the reason why I'm eating out all of the time is like I probably eat out more often than I'd personally like to, and that's because it's literally my job. Like it is my job to go to restaurants, talk to chefs about their allergy practices. Like if that was not my job, I would not be eating out that much, right? So I think it's like a tainted existence where it's like again, like I would probably only be eating out maybe like twice a month if this wasn't something that I like needed to do to collect data and information for my app to help other people, right? So like it don't take my life as like, oh, I should be doing that too. I should be traveling, eating out all the time, right? It's like that is what I'm doing to be able to create this app and create this resource to help other people be able to feel comfortable eating out twice a month, right? So my existence is a bit extreme.
You know, I'm a bit older than you, but I really regret sometimes not having social media when I was traveling the world or I went to different countries by myself to show people that it's okay and like I was okay and it was a great time. But then I'm also glad that I didn't have social media because it would have just been craziness. But you know, I feel like I want people to know that like I went and like moved to New York by myself at 20. You know, like I kind of want to show that, but then I'm glad that I didn't have that pressure when I was that young. But it's that kind of thing of we just rarely share the positive parts of our lives.
Yeah, I mean, me and Josh were talking about this the other day, like especially within the restaurant industry, like it's human nature to be reactive instead of proactive. And that's like so true when it comes to food allergies and celiac disease is like a lot of restaurants like they're very reactive. So like if somebody gets sick, they like retrain, put all these resources in place, but it's very hard sometimes to like get people to be proactive. You have to really like nail it into them that this is important. And so that's just like so true in a lot of other parts and like similar to media, right? Like they're gonna show the parts that are reactive because they're more exciting. They're not gonna show the proactive because it's honestly kind of boring. And it's interesting because like my content, you see that as well, right? Like if I post a video about me being like, hey, I don't really miss bread, like it's not my favorite. Like I'm fine with my celiac disease. I feel like it's built confidence, like helped me, you know, get like understand myself psychologically. Like I feel like there's so many positives to me like getting diagnosed with this disease. Like whenever I post that type of content, sure, it like does fine, but like people aren't really interested in that as much as like my reaction after me getting sick, and then that will get like, you know, 11 million views or something like that. So it's also just like interesting because you see it with content where it's like I try to post positive stuff, but it just like doesn't perform as well, and I post it anyways because I think it's an important message to put out there, but like people are always interested in the negative.
I think relatable is very different to the negative. I think that's a very, like, being like, look, this is how I experience this thing is very different to, like, I don't know. I think you did well when you just recently had a reaction. But
even with my experience around getting sick, like the restaurant did handle it really well. And so I like did not want to bash them online, obviously, because they were like taking proper precautions and like retraining, and like I was in contact with corporate. And so it's like I try not to like create, like I don't want there to be like negativity on my platform, but I do find it interesting that like those more relatable, like showing the anxiety, showing like those points in time where like I'm saying, hey, you know, celiac isn't sunshine and rainbows all the time, those tend to perform
because
better,
you do
probably
like,
because people relate to it.
yeah, and we want to know where things could go wrong a lot of in our lives. Like we comes back to control. We like to have control. So if I know that you then get anxiety too, it allows me to be like, oh, okay, like at least I know they do and it's a normal thing, and it's like I'm not crazy in thinking this way. And I think that's just so normal. And I think, yeah, like not saying that we don't post relatable content. It's just more like relatable in the positive way, not in the negative way. Thank you so much. I can't believe like we've talked so much and I love it.
Super great to chat. I know it's been like probably 3-4 years since we have, so it was nice to catch up, and I appreciate you asking me to come on.
Of course, thank you. I'm just very glad that you were very open and honest with like your past and stuff, so I'm really glad that we were able to like get into that different side of you.
Yeah,
so yeah,
of course.
thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.